Americans look forward to the Thanksgiving holiday as a time of gathering with friends and relatives, a time of shared happiness. But many among us dread times like this because it means facing people who've hurt us, or worse, people we've hurt. Unresolved conflicts are the collateral damage of sin, even forgiven sin. Today, putting damaged relationships back on track. Stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Today, Erwin Lutzer is continuing his series on what happens after you've blown it, reconnecting with God and others. He's talking about reconciling with those you've hurt and has this advice on asking for forgiveness.
Now, let's suppose that there is an offense between you and someone else, and let us suppose that their responsibility in the offense is 80%, whereas yours is only at the very most 20%. That's the way it usually comes out when you do counseling. Yeah, well, maybe, but. All right, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. What you and I must do if we think that our offense is 20% and somebody else's is 80%, we cannot trivialize our 20%. We must consider, when we're asking for forgiveness, we must consider our 20% as really the 100%. We're responsible for our part in the offense. And therefore we go to people with humility and we ask them for forgiveness. And we don't go there hoping then that they will confess their 80%. We know that they might, because oftentimes the bridge is set up through our own asking for forgiveness. It is then a bridge that they can cross over as well. But we leave them in the presence of God. What we are interested in is our fault and our responsibility. And we leave them to God. And when we go, we don't say, now, if I've done something wrong. What do you mean, if? If you know that you've done something wrong, then don't say if. If is an attempt to water things down and say, well, maybe I did something wrong, maybe I didn't, but if I did. Listen, if you know it and God knows it and the other person knows it, then don't go with your ifs. You say to them, because I have wronged you, I seek your forgiveness. Now here it gets tricky. What the other person might say is, well, it wasn't really that big a deal. Don't you dare be satisfied with that, and I'll tell you why. What they want to do is to keep the teeter-totter balanced. You see, what they want to say is, if I actually forgive this person, if I say, I forgive you, then the weight and the responsibility is now with me, and the teeter-totter is no longer in balance, but all the weight now comes on my side, and now suddenly I become responsible for my responses, and I would much prefer if I could just continue to fester this hatred and this dislike for this person, and if I forgive him, God knows what's going to happen. It's all going to fall on me. So I prefer to say, well, it wasn't that big a deal. Then what you say, with a smile on your face, of course, all of this is happening with smiles. You say, I just find it so wonderful if you could find it in your heart to forgive me. And I'd love to hear you say those words, I forgive you for X, Y, and Z. Now, if the person isn't ready and says, I can't forgive, then you simply say that when you're ready, you come and tell me. But reconciliation with you is a very, very high priority within the church. And the more powerful the Holy Spirit of God works, the more powerful people overcome all kinds of barriers and bitternesses and long-standing family feuds and arguments and who was right and who said what. And it's all laid down because Jesus forgave us. And therefore we are quick to forgive. forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. We seek reconciliation through forgiveness. That's the first principle. Second principle is that our confession must be as broad as the offense. It must be as broad as the offense. Look at what it says again. I'm reading again, chapter 18, verse 15 of Matthew. If your brother sins against you, go show him his fault just between the two of you. At this point, there's no use bringing others in. If it is a personal feud and a personal offense, then what happens is you go to the people who are involved, and at that point, it doesn't have to go beyond that. Later on, some member of the church may get involved, as Jesus said, if there cannot be reconciliation, but you don't begin at that point. You go to the person whom you've wronged, and you ask their forgiveness, and you receive their forgiveness. Now, of course, there are all kinds of complicated situations. Anyone who's done any counseling knows that immediately this question is asked. What about a man who may have an affair, or a woman who may have an affair? What do we do then? A couple of months ago, I told you that after a worship time in Minneapolis, 200 or 300 men came forward when an invitation was given for all those who are involved in adulterous relationships that need to make something right. And it dawned on me that that's just like men, because men are oftentimes the aggressors. And then in my more sober moments, it also dawned on me that that meant that there were 200 or 300 women also involved in this. What happens then? To whom does this man have to confess now? He confesses to the person with whom he had the relationship, most assuredly, because there has been wrong there. But he has also wronged his wife because of the delicate nature of the marriage relationship. And yes, in order to have reconciliation in that home, in order for that to take place, there must also be reconciliation between the spouse who has been wronged. And I suggest to you today that if you're in that category, that you talk to one of the pastors who can help you, and maybe meet with a pastor as they guide you